So right now with the Summer Games Fest happening, there are a lot of game announcements coming out. And with the game announcements come in a bit of controversy. So with one game that was announced, people were pretty excited because it was for the game series called Crazy Taxi, which is a series of games published by Sega. And during the Xbox Games Showcase, Crazy Taxi World Tour was announced. And for context, the last Crazy Taxi game that came out was in like 2002. So anytime a new game comes out for a title that did not have a new game for a long time, people are pretty hyped. So all the way at the bottom of the Steam page is a little tag, AI generated content disclosure. The developers describe how their game uses AI, and that is something that Steam added. They basically said, if you use AI, you got to disclose it on your page. And it reads, at Sega Corporations, we utilize generative AI as a support tool for developers, aiming to provide better content to our users and enable developers to focus more on creative tasks. We have used such generative AI support tools during the development of Crazy Taxi World Tour. No AI was used in reference to the performers in the game. Once that was noticed, people had their 2 cents about it. A top comment for a post about this reads, "This is why we're sticking to the PS2 version." Another user says, quote, "Focus more on creative tasks," end quote, always means, quote, "we stop paying somebody to do the creative tasks," end quote. Other people also felt like, hey, at least they disclosed it, and other people feel like they want to know more about how the generative AI is implemented in this game before they truly form a full opinion. So after this, people had their 2 cents about it, and it was making its way through news articles, where Sega actually provided some more context. And that was to the Game Informer. This is an article written by Kyle Hilliard on June 7th, where Sega provided a response. Writing, at Sega Corporation, generative AI is available as an optional support tool for developers, enabling our team to focus more on creative tasks and ultimately focus on what matters most, delivering better games to our customers. Generative AI was used to support our teams during the development of background assets for Crazy Taxi World Tour. Assets generated were still subject to review by the development team. And a Kotaku article written by Kenneth Shepard provided even more context, where the original series creator Kenji Kano added some extra 2 cents, writing, quote, "We used it as a reference." Quote, "So our artists will pull up and generate some of their ideas, and they would look at that generated image and they would draw the actual thing. So actual creators, everything from programming to assets, everything is made by an actual human. It is only used as a reference for them to look at, and they would actually create the thing that would go into the game." So I guess used in the concept of concept art. And so the author kind of pushed back, being like, "Oh, what are your thoughts on the perceived benefit of Gen AI versus backlash?" And Kano says, quote, "For us, the extent of how we use Gen AI is only what I mentioned earlier. It's just for ideas and a reference. Moving forward in the future, generative AI is probably going to be more of a hot topic. But I think that's all I can say right now on how we use generative AI for this game." End quote. So a snippet of this conversation was grabbed and posted to Twitter, where it got 2.3 thousand likes, almost 600,000 views, and people in the comments had their things to say. One of the top comments reads, quote, "We were lazy to do the concept art and copy from the plagiarism machine," end quote. F off. There was no reason to use it at all. If they wanted to generate their ideas, they would draw the effing idea, which is their job as a concept artist. Another user says, "Using concepts generated by AI and then implementing them yourself is not meaningfully different from having AI create the thing outright. This was straight up a terrible and lazy answer that made them look even worse." Sorry, this was just funny. Quote, "You need to AI generate a taxi for a reference," end quote. Because again, this is the taxi driving game. But Sega using AI kind of makes sense given the fact that they've had a pretty pro AI stance that they have talked about publicly. This is an article written by gamesindustry.biz, written by Alex Forbes Calvin, December 5th, 2025, where it talks about how there was an investor Q&A where they talk pretty positively about AI. This is the English translation of the transcript. Quote, "Rather than fully following the trend towards large-scale development, we will also pursue efficiency improvements, like leveraging AI. However, as AI adoption can face strong resistance in creative areas like character creation, we will proceed by carefully assessing appropriate use cases, like streamlining development processes." So here, they're pretty positive about it. I think it's interesting how they note that there's resistance in the form of like character creation, conceptualizing characters. They just, I guess, used it to conceptualize backgrounds instead, which I mean, I feel like kind of makes it feel like you missed the point, but I digress. And Crazy Taxi is not the only game that recently also experienced some backlash about their generative AI use. There is another game called Stellar Blade, where the sequel, Stellar Blade Blood Rain, also had its trailer revealed this weekend. And that also sparked a bunch of generative AI pointers. A user basically points out that there are a fair amount of elements on the wall that look like they should be Chinese writing. This game was hinted to be set in Chongqing, which is one of the cities in China. And if you look at the background, I can read Chinese. This is not not Chinese. These are almost Chinese characters, but they're not quite. Here are another set of characters that I could tell you are, again, almost Chinese characters, but not quite. This, like, almost looks like a character, but there's an extra stroke. This almost is a character, but it looks like there's 2 lines on top instead of 1. This could be Rain. Like, it's just not quite there. Even these 2 could be characters. This one, the second one, is most definitely not a character. So it's interesting that this game also features what looks like generative AI elements in the background. Some people were arguing maybe it is a placeholder that will be replaced in the future. I think it's just interesting because, like, these are words. So you could just, I don't know, have a Chinese person or somebody who can speak Chinese. The developer is Korean, right? I don't know, go into their typing program and type out chicken restaurant, public laundry, I don't know, boba shop, and just put the text vertically. These are just stupid reasons, I think, to be using generative AI to make little banners of fake Chinese characters. People were also arguing, oh, maybe it's like a fake language being used, which Stellar Rain historically hasn't implemented. And they don't have one like that. Like, other games do have like a fake language they use. Stellar Rain does not seem to be one that does that. There was also this key art that was floating around that does feature some elements that are real, like this little tag for a Chinese jewelry store that does actually exist. Once again, we have AI background. I'm also confused because I don't think that's Chinese, unless it's a character that I don't know. Maybe it's traditional? Like, what is that supposed to be? There's like no character that looks like that. Like, that's not written correctly. There's no gap there. So yeah. Not to mention the buildings are all completely AI. Like, the windows are all like kind of stacked on each other, and the geometry doesn't make sense. They're all like kind of wobbly. At least these elements in the background look generated. The CEO of Shift Up, and Shift Up is the publisher and developer for this game, at least for Stellar Blade Blood Rain, Hyung Tae Kim, stated in an article that, yeah, you know, that he, as a Korean developer, feels like they can't compete with the labor output that China has. And so they're using generative AI to try to make up for that difference. On a little bit of a side tangent, the game has a whole separate side controversy, mainly about the main female protagonist, who is named Evie, who happens to look really young.
You're acting a little strange today.
Why does she look 12 and talk like she's 30?
Yep. We even have Asmongold saying it. The main thing people are having is with this frame specifically. There are a lot of people arguing back and forth about the age. A lot of people are like, oh, she just looks like an Asian woman. Asian women happen to look very young. I myself am an Asian woman. My family is obviously Chinese and Asian, and I have a lot of Asian friends. A lot of my Asian friends look quite young for their age, but they do look like adults. I personally do feel like she looks really young in this frame. The CEO, Kim, again, of Shift Up, said that, quote, we intentionally set Evie to be shorter and to look younger. And, quote, for combat, I thought it would be very appealing to have a small-statured character engage in intense close-quarter combat, end quote. So, yeah, she was intentionally made to be small and young. To me, again, a big question would just be, why was this design choice made? Was it because it's cool to see a small character beat up big monsters? Yeah, that's cool. As a petite woman, nice to see petite characters, right? Was petite representation the reason why she was made small? I don't know. Or to pander to a specific audience. Interesting. Just some food for thought. But this was a whole separate controversy that came out about this game specifically, alongside the generative AI claims that people were making. In fact, this controversy largely overshadowed the generative AI points that people were making about the key art, etc. But wrapping this all up, these are like the 2 big things that kind of came out about the Summer Games Fest, about generative AI in games, that was kind of flooding Twitter. So I would love to hear your thoughts about these games. Are you going to be playing them? Or is the generative AI usage something that is making you hold off a little bit? And with that, if you like this video, I appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Don't forget to check me out on Etsy. I have digital art there for streamers and creators. I also have a coffee with free resources, like a free sponsorship guide. And I stream on Twitch 3 days a week, Mondays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. PST and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. PST. So I hope to catch y'all there or in another video. Peace.